طيب لو حضرتك جاهز يا دكتور ممكن أبدأ؟
اتفضلي.
تمام. طيب في الأول أنا يعني حابة أشكر حضرتك جدا على وقتك، وإن شاء الله يعني تكون الستوك ديت مثمرة ونطلع منها مستفيدين أفضل استفادة. بس يعني أستاذن حضرتك بس في الأول هقول انترو كده في كام دكيقة بس، وبعدين نبدأ السيشن إن شاء الله.
اتفضلي.
تمام. مساء الخير يا شباب، يا رب تكونوا بخير. معانا النهارده دكتور ناير هيكلمنا عن اللارج لانجويج موديلز والاي اي والابلكيشن بتاعته ومستقبله. دكتور ناير ليه خبرة أكتر من 25 سنة في مجال الماشين ليرنينج، كمان هو حصل على دكتوراه من جامعة ووترلو في كندا، والماسترز بتاعته كانت من جامعة القاهرة، وحاليا هو بيشتغل برنسبل انجينير في شركة مايكروسوفت. إن شاء الله التوك بتاعتنا النهاردة دي الأجندة بتاعتها. أول 5 دقايق هتكون introduction اللي هو الوقت اللي احنا فيه ده دلوقتي. بعد كده هيكون أول جزء من التوك هيكون لمدة 25 دقيقة، وبعدين في Q&A لمدة 5 دقايق. بعد كده هيكون النص التاني من التوك لمدة 25 دقيقة برضو. بعد كده هيكون في Q&A تاني، وآخر 5 دقايق إن شاء الله هتكون للكلوزنج. وبس كده. وبينار النهارده ان شاء الله هنكون ختمنا الويبينار بروجرام بتاعنا بتاع EMBS، واتمنى تكونوا استفدتوا من البروجرام ومستنيينكم ان شاء الله في البروجرامز الجايه. وان شاء الله اخر 5 دقايق هبعت هنا في الشات فيدباك فورم، وهتتبعت على الميل وعلى الواتساب برضو، ومهم ان انتوا تملوها عشان نحسن من الاكسبيرينس بتاعتكم كMBS participants. وشكرا لحضرتك يا دكتور على الانتظار. اتفضل حضرتك ابدا التوك.
شكرا جزيلا، وسعيد بالحضور وسعيد بالدعوة، وأرجو تكون فيها استفادة للجروب هنا يعني إن شاء الله. يعني
احنا أسعد يا دكتور إن شاء الله.
share my screen. Stop sharing. You can't see my screen.
تمام شايفين.
تمام كده. انا دايما لما حد بيسال السؤال ده في اول ميتنج ببقى يعني حاسس ان الناس محتاجه تقول له لا، عشان يعني يقلق شويه، بس يعني شكرا ان انت اكدتي لي ان السكرين يعني is showing. مساء الخير. انا اسمي ناير ونس، وشكرا باشمهندس حبيبه you did do an introduction. انا يعني حاليا principal engineer في commercialization experience team في حاجة اسمها Azure Cognitive Services, which enables users to develop applications leveraging AI tools على طبعا Azure infrastructure. اشتغلت قبل كده في language cognitive services which was directed على language، وكان ليا مرحلة قبل كده في مايكروسوفت ريسيرش، وبين يعني في وسط مايكروسوفت كده فتحت ستارت اب سريعه كده، خدت عدد من السنين في using AI in content delivery. انا برضو بروفيسور في adjunct بروفيسور في معهد بحوث الالكترونيات هنا في مصر، واتخرجت من جامعه القاهره، وليها معزه خاصه عندي يعني، بس من زمان شويه يعني، بس المعزه ما زالت موجوده يعني. التوك النهارده على الجنريتيف اي اي يعني ايه، بس هي الاي اي موجود بقاله شويه، واحنا داخلين نيو ايرا انتو ذا اي اي، بس في مراحل عدت بيها الارتفيشال انتليجنس كفيلد وصلنا الى ما ابتدينا فيه اللي احنا فيه حاليا يعني. In 1950 في ال 50s the Turing test was established ازاي يعني ممكن الكمبيوتر يمثل نفسه زي انسان. Actually a group of researchers قالوا انهم هيقضوا صيف زي الصيف اللي انتوا قضيتوه في الويبينار ده يحلوا كل مشاكل الاي اي، بس كانت الظاهر اكبر كتير يعني من تطلعاتهم يعني. واستمر ال AI founded in mathematics, predicate calculus, rule-based systems فترة طويلة من الزمن، لحد ما ظهر يعني statistical machine learning. machine learning نفسه أصلا برضو كتعبير يعني ظهر في الخمسينات، where you want to leverage data to actually learn rather than use rule-based or handcrafted models. وبرضو طلع يعني models that are inspired from biological يعني mathematical and biological fields زي يعني ايه الفازي لوجيك وزي النيورال نتوركس كلها كانت established يعني ايه tools كانت ظهرت يعني ايه في الثمانينات والتسعينات من القرن الماضي to use statistical machine learning اللي ابتدى يبين يعني ايه performance احسن من rule based systems اللي كانت موجوده. fast forward يعني ايه لهذا القرن وجيفري هينتون واحد من الناس اللي founders يعني في النيورال نتوركس يعني was able to invent a fast algorithm بيتيح learning من networks كبيرة. limitations كانت موجودة من ال computational resources وال learning algorithms ما كانتش يعني قادرة إن تخلي النيورال نتوركس expandوا in their size. بس جيفري هينتون's work في هذا القرن يعني ايه في اوائل القرن في 2006 evolved into what we know as deep learning مع ال existence of computational power enabled يعني extensive neural network models that extract complex patterns و create a new wave of models اللي حاليا لحد very recently كانت ال LSTMs وال RNNs وال CNNs ومؤخرا يعني ايه يعني what is taking the world by storm generative AI is all founded على القصة دي. Generative generation is not very new بس حصل برضو يعني طفرة في الالجوريثمز حاجة اسمها الجانز أو generative adversarial networks. الجانز دي basically يبقى two models بيلعبوا game مع بعض واحد بيحاول يخدع الثاني بيحاول يكتشف. Together they actually go and learn so that you actually learn how to not trick your opponent وبالتالي الموديل نفسه learns وده is foundational يعني to what we know now as generative AI. So generative AI is the new frontier of machine learning and AI. يعني the current يعني advancements that is driving a lot of AI and AI involvement. وده يعني is a big change from the limitations اللي كانت موجودة في ال AI بصفة عامة to do classification or do prediction based على شوية data. فمثلا صورة زي اللي موجودة يعني models قبل كده were able to perceive and classify إن في هنا قطة أو في هنا يعني لوحة شطرنج but was not able to create content, not create an image, not to create a detailed caption or description للصورة اللي قدامنا دي. وزي يعني يعني models كتيرة دلوقتي التكست يعني is usually a cornerstone of how these models advance. بعد كده it moves into other fields as speech, images and code. اللي هم حاليا يعني are rapidly maturing and moving forward وحاليا بتسمعوا حاجات كتيرة يعني موجودة في الاندستري models موجودة ChatGPT obviously يعني has hit the world يعني في shows في أمريكا late night shows comedy shows فكانوا بيتكلموا على ChatGPT فالمينستريم now understands يعني ChatGPT ولا heard about it it's becoming more abundant. في other models زي DALL-E يعني which is focusing on images موجودة in production and people can use them في دلوقتي يعني. So Gen AI, generative AI by short is called Gen AI subfield من ال deep neural networks بس هو ال key element بتاعه is actually the ability to create new content. Generation نفسه بقاله شوية فيعني احنا بنكلم التليفونات والتليفونات بترد علينا فبتقول حاجه لما بترد علينا في مايكروسوفت بينج ترانسليت جوجل ترانسليت or any translation service واحد بيديله يعني جمله بيرد له بجمله ثانيه فالability to produce content موجوده either founded يعني بصوره زي زمان يعني في صوره rule based systems يعني زي سيري very early on أو كورتانا أو جوجل نيكست كان عنده شوية حاجات كده يعني rule based systems بيمشي عليها في الجنريشن. الجديد بقى إن هو يعني this ability to create new content using these Gen AI. الcontent ده يعني is not limited to only text بس ممكن يبقى text, ممكن يبقى audio, ممكن images, videos. You can actually generate synthetic data to try and retrain models. وcode. You can generate يعني these different elements of content using Gen AI models يعني to realize different use cases. من ضمنها content generation يعني فأنا عايز create some content about a document, عايز create an image, عايز create a caption, عايز create some aspect, question answering systems, أسأله سؤال ويرد عليا as foundation of chat, as FAQ systems, virtual assistants, conversations that are becoming more intelligent. مش مجرد يعني حاجات canned process بترد عليا. personalization, فI can set tone. ممكن اقول له انا عايز المحتوى اللي انت بتطلعه ده مناسب لفئة معينة، مناسب لمجال معين، لمكان معين، لثقافة معينة. الناس بتستخدمه to do storytelling, poetry, creative writing. يعني مش حاجات يعني كان اعتدنا حتى في الجنريشن تبقى very formal, very enterprise, very rigid. ده يعني has more color to it. Translation is also definitely a use case. Translation من لغة لغة, translation يعني to try to shift things in light of specific requirements. وحاليا code generation is also a very big as a use case where there's several tools بتعمل الحكاية دي موجودة to do auto completion. Specifically for OpenAI, OpenAI is not Microsoft. OpenAI is an organization or an enterprise لوحدها يعني set forth يعني من مدة من عدد من السنين إن هم they create these big networks, big foundation networks. But they created a set of networks. There is a partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI to take these models to the enterprise. من ضمنهم الGPT, generative pre-trained transformer model بالversions بتاعته. وده basically بيعمل text completion. بديله text هو بيحاول understand. We generate language that completes what I've been saying. Codecs, these models understand, will generate code. And they also sort of can translate code into natural language. DALI, ده بيطلع images, بيقدر manipulate images, generate images from language, how you understand images. Where ChatGPT is a manifestation in a conversational environment للGPT models, اللي أنا أقدر أكلمه ويرد عليا in a dialogue form. فدي models اللي OpenAI currently avails provides for people to actually use. This is also hand in hand مع the notion of using this as an API, as a service. كان برضو أنا لما ابتديت ال AI ابتديت من مدة من السنين كان الأول في rule based and then models resided عندي أنا. فأنا كنت لازم أنا أجيب الداتا و set forth a training للمودلز دهيت و keep it. I needed some form of expertise موجود أقدر أتعامل معاه عشان خاطر أقدر generate المودلز دهيت. إنما حاليا دي موجودة as a service, موجودة في الكلاود. You can call it by an API. فأقدر أدي an API call, أديها prompt, يرجع لي a response that might be a completion, might be a set of code, or might be an image. وأقدر أتعامل مع هذا الأساس بدون ما عندي دراية كاملة أو understanding, detailed understanding. محتاج understanding, but it's not a detailed understanding. إزاي أقدر produce a system. فsimplified البروسيس دهيت عشان خاطر الناس تقدر developers يقدروا يتعاملوا معاها بدون ما يبقوا AI or machine learning experts. Currently it's being widely used. Actually cognitive services, which I'm part of, founded كده على القصة دهيت إن هم عايزين يعملوا API calls to AI. حتى لو هي suboptimal, بس it saves a lot of engineering requirements or a lot of AI expertise محتاجة عشان خاطر الواحد realize a smart solution at the end of the day. This is currently also allowing more adoption للمودلز دهيت. من باب يعني ايه ان انا اجرب يعني ايه يعني do what you preach. انا رحت يعني actually في التحضير للويبينار ده رحت سالت Azure chat completion service انه يشرح لي what generative AI is. قلت له generated يعني ايه يعني in the span of 100 words وsuitable يعني ايه للاودينس اللي انا تخيلت انه موجود يعني ايه senior engineering students موجودين عشان خاطر اقدر اشرح لهم يعني what is Gen AI. فقدر يكريت this understanding على Gen AI within الكونفاينز اللي انا حطيتها. فانا قدرت personalize وقدرت اجنريت وقدرت set the tone للاوتبوت ده هو. وكده طلبت منه طب يعني من عاملها في جامعه القاهره فيعني Arabic might be a better flavor. can you take this description and produce it in Arabic. فطلع لي الناتج ده يعني. وزي ما احنا شايفين هنا هو عنده درايه بحاجات معلومات موجوده بصفه عامه. انا يعني I mentioned ان انا كنت شغال في حاجه اسمها language cognitive services. وجزء من language cognitive services دي creation of bots. ازاي عم نعمل tools to create bots يعني. فكان مثلا ال general knowledge had to be encoded into bots. فلو كنت بعمل a ticketing or a booking service for sporting events فكنت لازم اعرفه يعني what sporting events ايه اللي موجود بما اني بحب الكوره يعني ايه الفرق اللي موجوده في الكوره بيلعب في انهي دوري يعني ايه المعلومات اللي موجوده عليه والريليشن شيبس اللي بينهم عشان خاطر اقدر identify elements من هذا الامر يعني. لما يعني تشات جي بي تي was setting the world by storm لما كنت بجرب القصه دي يعني ايه I only mentioned ان مثلا عايز اعمل as an example اديته حاجه اسمها few shot which I will refer to يعني a bit later. بس اديت له مثال ان يعني ايه يعني فرقه اسمها السي هوكس سياتل سي هوكس بتلعب في دوري الامريكان فوتبول وانا عايز احجز لها تذكره. ده كان الاكزامبل الوحيد اللي اديت له على فرق رياضيه يعني ايه وبتلعب في دوري. ولما سالته على ليفربول يعرف انه بيلعب في الانجليش بريمير ليج. ف what was encoded into the network is a general understanding or a general knowledge او المعرفه اللي موجوده عند يعني ايه in a digital form عندنا دلوقتي موجوده encoded جوه المودلز الكبيره دهيت. فاقدر استخدمها بدون ما اقدر افيد in a lot of information that is usually very tedious or very time consuming للdevelopers. this was an example يعني that I used Gen AI to do. Why now? ليه Gen AI is taking the world by storm. في several driving drivers يعني in this new era يعني. One of the major drivers is data sets. المودلز الكبيرة دي بتعوز يعني a lot of data sets, a lot of data يعني. يعني over the years يعني there has been a collection of large data sets that are available, that are human annotated, that are of good quality وموجودة. that helped. In addition to also there's a lot of unlabeled data. There's advancements in using unsupervised learning. في supervised learning اللي بيستخدم data annotated وعارفينها وبعد كده في unsupervised learning for advancements in the models and the availability of that data. Well, I'll touch on how that يعني was enabled in the next slide. بس the abundance of data sets has definitely allowed the models دي انها تبقى موجوده ونقدر نستخدمها. بس الداتا لوحدها مش كفايه لازم يبقى عندي مودلز عشان تقدر تليرن من الداتا سيتس دي. فالداتا سيتس دي يعني ايه والمودلز have advanced. There's a lot of research حصل to produce these types of models يعني ايه يعني based على modeling approaches or techniques موجوده. وحاليا يعني the existence of pre-trained models ان انا اقدر يعني ايه train a model يبقى عندي شويه data و train a model to do a specific task with the ability to publish that يعني ايه either as proprietary or open source. بس obviously open sourcing الحاجات دي يعني allowed others to advance pretty fast. فيعني كان في models at very early stages بتعمل embeddings دي برضه ساعدت يعني ايه ان الناس تقدر تستخدم الembedding space والsemantic space عشان تقدر to advance a lot of things as an example يعني. بس the abundance of the data, the models and these pre-trained models ساعدت في why this is changing. models دي بتحتاج a lot of computational resource. فالadvancements في الهاردوير الجي بي يو specifically وهاو these GPUs are suitable للموديلنج اللي بيحصل هنا. يعني ده ساعد كتير presence of cloud services يعني على مايكروسوفت Azure or Amazon or Google. كل البيج بلايرز دول عندهم cloud services بتتيح ال computational accessibility ان انا يبقى عندي access to these GPUs، اقدر اترين المودلز دهيت، اقدر اتعامل معاها. The presence of open source software, or the mode of open source software. So I'll mention here Hugging Face. Hugging Face is a platform. عليها a lot of data, عليها a lot of models, عليها pre-trained models that you can actually leverage in order to create these tasks على these large models. And it is open source, and you can actually use a lot of that to try these approaches. The third pillar is innovative deep learning models. الجانز اللي انا mentioned it's a game between two models، يعني ازاي يقدروا ان هم يعني واحد يتعلم يخدع الثاني والثاني يتعلم الخداع ده، and they hand in hand together learn to come to an optimal learning to the task at hand. In addition the transformer model اللي انا يعني I'll shed a little more light عليه and currently more recently reinforced learning from human feedback, the ability to introduce human feedback. And actually OpenAI have been working or claim is a good part of what is advancing in models بتاعتهم. All these three dimensions have enabled the achievements pushing into this new era of leveraging LLMs and the production of LLMs in order to be able to realize the solutions اللي احنا بنشوفها now. Transformer models is a machine learning tool. It's actually figuring out or taking a sequence sequential data, finding relationships between ins and outs between these words, and then be able to transform it or translate it into another sequence. They apply حاجة اسمها attention or self-attention models to identify dependencies in this sequential data. I'll not run into any details more than that, but one of the key elements is their ability to learn from unsupervised data, do unsupervised learning. بدل ما أنا كنت confined with the very limited human annotated data اللي محتاجة تبقى vetted through of quality blah blah blah. حاليا أقدر leverage a larger amount of data with only very little human annotated data that can allow me to learn at a scale. كمان يعني المودلز can scale. And the more parameters created allows these models to actually advance their performance. فلو شفنا the trajectory you've probably seen a graph for LLM models as they grow, they're currently almost hitting 200 billion parameters at this stage. They're huge and humongous models in order to realize understanding or encoded understanding that we have in our know-how or on the internet. Basically these large language models were able to absorb the internet and learn from it. The internet had a lot of text, it had a lot of news, it had a lot of code, it had a lot of PubMed, it had a lot of medical information, it had a lot of sporting information, it had a lot and wealth of so many things. وبالتالي المودلز دي encode within themselves a large amount of information that we currently have as humanity. And the task was to actually make an analogy between different tasks and the sequence to sequence transformation or translation. And then عندي sequence ABC بعد كده أقدر ألاقي equivalent sequence. ازاي أقدر ألاقي analogy to different tasks using that transformer model. I will not linger على tech. This is not the purpose of this, but they're interesting, and you will find a lot of literature you can read على transformer model. So why now? Why should anyone care? AI is currently evolving as a very general purpose tool. It can be used as many things, and its foundation to developing a lot of systems and allowing developers وحتى individuals to do things in simple language. The new coding language, الcoin is the new coding language is English. ان انا اقدر اعبر عن حاجه وتقدر تطلع لي an output in code rather than having to go and learn a lot of code. That's not totally true, but it is able to spit out a lot of useful information. And Andrew Ng researchers out of Stanford. يعني أي حد مهتم بالماشين ليرنينج في الغالب يعني سمع عنه. coined إن في analogy between AI واختراع الكهرباء. يعني الكهرباء في حد ذاتها يعني الاكزيستنس بتاعتها enabled a lot of other things, including our session, computers. All of this is only able to be created when electricity was invented or discovered. Well, AI is foundation for many things, and it's becoming very abundant. Accuracy بتاعتها والeffectiveness are improving. It enables a lot of use cases يعني that were very limited قبل كده نتيجة إنها كانت معتمدة على human annotated data, presence of data, or presence of computational power. And حاليا it's very economical يعني إن أي حد يقدر يتعامل معها. A lot of people are using GPT, even non-techs. أنا يعني أعرف ناس كتيرة ما لهمش في التكنولوجي. محامي بيستخدمها يعني to verify things. ناس في sales يعني in different elements بيستخدموا يعني either a proprietary model developed for them ولا مثلا ChatGPT. They're paying the fees for enterprise ChatGPT and working with that in their day-to-day lives, and they're not technical folks. Well, they're becoming more abundant يعني وجودهم open source accessibility, also customizable models. لما أجيب open source I can customize them. With availability of computational resource that enable individuals who want to work on these models have all added up to the era that we are in now, and then this whole wave is taking the world by storm. And currently, this is creating a lot of applications and services that are being used by the layman, by popular people, by common people. So there's two words في large language models وال foundational models. لو حد هيبص يعني ايه in the literature that's talking about this, these are two words. Large language models are actually what they say. They're large. وبيحاولوا يعملوا natural language processing tasks, and possibly more complex and simple or more complex, but so they use a lot of more data. Foundational models are actually large language models, but so they're trained على a specific task that you can use or you can fine tune. من ضمنهم GPT, من ضمنهم BART, Llama, and many others, and they can be used for a specific language understanding or language generation task at hand. So foundation models are actually pre-built or pre-trained or pre-existing large language models for a very specific task. When large language models use an encoder decoder scheme, basically الكمبيوتر ما بيفهمش الكلمات إنما بيفهم ones and zeros. But we need to represent an input into a set of tokens. The tokens here are not generally words. They're subwords. ونستخدم التokens دي نحولهم لembeddings في حاجة اسمها embedding space, which is a very dense space to represent concepts. Where embeddings D are then fed into a pre-trained transformer model, where then comes out a prediction عشان أطلع predicted text, and then feedback is helping sort of the model improve as it goes in order to alleviate some aspects of errors. And then basically an encoder-decoder scheme of using a large language model in practice. Currently, there is out-of-the-box models موجودة to do NLP tasks. في NLP مقسوم إلى جزئين، حاجة اسمها NLU Natural Language Understanding و NLG Natural Language Generation. Understanding زي entity recognition, classification, sentiment analysis, or any other NLU tasks out of the box. Currently في models بتعمل الحكاية دي trained على data in order to actually handle these models, and also natural language generation like summarization or paraphrasing with sentence generations or other tasks. برضو في models that actually handle that, and they're using through حاجة اسمها prompting. إزاي أقدر إن أنا أدخل له an input to describe some condition that I want in order to produce a task that is equivalent to that and utilize that. والمودلز دي ممكن تتعمل zero shot هنا is basically إن أنا بستخدمها as is. I do not introduce anything. I just ask it, give it an input and it produce an output. The one shot is actually to give it a single example to the task, and then it leverages that. أو few shot وإن أنا بديله multiple examples مش كتير that are handcrafted to exactly what I want in order to do it. فمثلا لو قلت له عايز entity recognition ماشي هيطلع لي الانتيتيز اللي فيها، بس انا مثلا عايز entity recognition in a JSON format. ممكن اقول له JSON format بس هو هيطلع لي اي JSON format. لا I need to detail or give it an example either one or few shot عشان خاطر الاوتبوت اقدر اطلعه بصوره مناسبه ليا that addresses my own specific content حتى which is again I'll touch on using your own data in producing output through either one shot or few shot learning. كل ما البروبلم تبقى simpler كل ما يعني I go towards the zero shot كل ما البروبلم تبقى very specific or more complicated or my requirements are more complicated, then I go to the right extreme, which is few shot, or actually I can go down to fine tuning or training. This is in contrast اللي كنا بنعمله زمان. يعني اللي بيشتغل في الاي اي كان لازم يبقى تاني برضه يجيب داتا وبعد كده يعمل individual model يطلع تاسك ويعمل الديفلوبمنت بتاعته الديبلويمنت ويتاكد ان هو يعني مظبوط, and then you build every individual model and then you pile them one after the other in order to realize a solution. It incurred a lot of cost and incurred slow development. وكل واحدة is trained on its own, has its own resource currently, and one model does all of these. I just need to customize it to the task that I want and utilize it immediately, and it can actually do one or more of these concurrently together. It has simplified بشكل كبير قوي the process of developing these models. To build an LLM, our analogy is to build a house. You can have ready-made. You just add data and work. You can have full renovation ان انا اخش يعني ايه واظبط يعني ايه اعمل fine tuning اظبطه من جوه بس I'm not really creating the house. or ان انا ابتدي من الاول خالص كده يعني ايه ابتدي من الاساس واطلع بيه عشان يعني something to realize my own, which is train your own. These are the three flavors يعني either adding data يعني zero shot, find single shot or few shot, أو fine tuning أو starting from scratch and training. In most cases, prompt engineering ready-made is actually the option that is in many use cases. It has a lot of merit in cost-wise, both for the development and for the requirements data compared to the custom build. وبرضه بنفس الحكايه يعني ايه لو انا جبت data يعني as prompt engineering يبقى the ability for me to produce an output is much faster, much more efficient, much more cost efficient than ان انا ابتدي من training يعني او do the old scheme اللي كان موجود قبل كده. And that's why most of the people actually revert to prompt engineering. في a lot of common LLMs موجودة. This is a list. It's probably يعني a little older. يعني you'll probably find much more advanced models عن دول. بس this يعني BERT was obviously a very basic element يعني and had 370 million parameters. It's currently dwarfed يعني ايه بالtrillions that we're working on يعني in the models. But so this is a list and a mosaic of different tasks that have different models that you can utilize. You don't necessarily need to buy a Ferrari to drive يعني down to get the groceries. يعني you might need يعني a more simpler model that suits your task or your scenario. There are proprietary and there's open source models. ففي يعني proprietary models اللي موجودة speed of development أسرع, الquality بتاعتهم generally is high. الcons بتاعته الcost والprivacy. الcost يعني بتاعه is higher والprivacy يعني you're lending people your data. Compared to open source, it's very tailored to the task. الانفرنس كوست بتاعه يعني ايه ممكن يبقى very controlled compared يعني ايه ل proprietary model. You have more control on your data, on your security, on a lot of things. الداونسايد بتاعه ان you need upfront investment يعني both التريننج بتاعه both للunderstanding بتاع الناس اللي هتشتغل عليه and the data. Your choice is actually based على يعني the task you're doing and how much you can look at that process. This is a mosaic of some of the applications or application categories اللي ممكن this new wave of AI does: search, generate, code generation, translation, classification, clustering, extraction, or rewriting content. Well, برضو out of I have no clue what happened. Sorry, am I still online? سامعني انا actually online ولا I got disconnected؟
يا دكتور احنا سامعين حضرتك.
اوكي معلش يعني باوربوينت قرر ان هو النهارده اجازه فيعني ايه زعل مني.
مش مشكلة حسن.
سألت actually يعني ايه يعني بينج شات بما اني هتكلم معاكم النهارده يعني ايه ال LLMs ممكن تستخدم في الفيلد اوف هيلث كير لايه؟ generating natural language responses يعني ايه to simplify يعني البيشنتس يعني ايه اصلا عندي يعني حتى وصف لو انتوا بتتعاملوا مع assistants بتتعامل for diagnosis يعني people use a very colorful way of expressing things مش زي ما الدكاتره بيقولوهم. فيعني وبرضه عايزين حاجات يفهموها ف how to generate يعني ايه natural language responses مناسبه للمخاطب. creating reports و summaries يعني ايه لو عندي شويه observations وشويه حاجات ازاي اقدر المها و create a medical summary. providing education and training يعني ايه ازاي اقدر اطلع content يعني that can allow healthcare professionals to actually work well with it. And they're also enabling a lot of things. انا يعني الدكتور احمد مرسي يعني كان زمان اظن كان بيتكلم معايا على scribing يعني جزء من مشاكل يعني ايه يعني digitization of content. enabling that يعني how correct it is يعني in order to do the electronic health record for example. These models can enable this to happen يعني with a far higher accuracy with far simpler resources عن اللي كانت محتاجاها قبل كده. large language models in healthcare is also taking يعني زي other domains يعني by storm. So how to choose the right LLM? There's a few dimensions that you need to ask. There's privacy يعني الداتا بتاعتي هتقعد في يعني where is it going to reside بالذات that you're actually talking about health data يعني في a lot more liability that you need to consider. It's a consideration to the service is where the data resides يعني if I'm sending it to a service you need to make sure that the service مش retaining this data ولا مش using it. الquality يعني بتاعتها يعني you need to assess the quality both for the task for the type of data but also for the end-to-end system. You can get a smaller fine-tuned model that's very domain specific ممكن يعني الquality بتاعته يبقى أحسن بس الoverhead cost بتاعه يبقى مختلف. There's some tools that are evolving. PromptFlow is one from Microsoft, but so there's other open source tools that assess both the individual quality of the model and the end-to-end scenario. الcost في cost initial cost for training الناس كتيرة يعني تقول لك هدفع فلوس كتير قوي عشان خاطر اترين الموديل ومحتاج جي بي يوز بس يعني you need to think about the training and the runtime. مش بس التريننج التريننج cost might be يعني large بس الruntime might be larger يعني بالذات لو أنا offering this to a large audience وهيبقى heavily used it needs to be يعني assessed. والlatency يعني لو أنا بعمل an offline process back office generate filing و generate documents يبقى latency is far less important than لو أنا بعمل bot interactive مع people asking about medical conditions ولا يعني latency is also a factor both in size of the model يعني كل ما نروح للمودلز الكبيرة كل ما نلاقي يعني more latency كل ما عندي slimmer model كل ما يبقى latency أقل. And also its proximity, its placement بحطه فين يعني where are the confines and boundaries that I have for that. And these are different factors that I have that you need to consider. But this is يعني a natural break يعني في الtalk. I did inject this على foundations يعني of LLMs, how to choose them, what to think about them with the wave of OpenAI or GenAI. And I can open the floor for questions for 5 minutes. I'm sorry I went 5 minutes over يعني في السكشن. باشمهندس حبيبة.
ايوه مع حضرتك. طيب شباب دلوقتي
اتفضلي.
لا اتفضل حضرتك.
كنت هقول لك يعني حابة في questions يعني I can answer or I can continue يعني whatever you choose يعني.
تمام شباب لو حد عنده سؤال يرفع ايده. تمام حضرتك يا دكتور تقدر تختار بقى.
مفيش حد رفع ايده؟
لا في 2 رافعين ايديهم.
طب اتفضلوا. اللي رفع الاول.
تمام ثانية. طيب ممكن اللي رفع ايده يتكلم؟
ازاي حضرتك يا دكتور؟
اهلا وسهلا.
أنا في ميكاترونكس، وكنت عايزة أسأل حضرتك، أنا interested في مجال ال AI وكده، فكنت يعني حابة أبدأ فيه، فكنت عايزة advice من حضرتك، يعني أبدأ إزاي؟
learn coding language يعني مناسب، يعني get on, there's a lot of open source يعني platforms you can play around with, get familiar مع السيرفيس. مش محتاجة يعني ايه تخشي في الفاين تيونينج. fine tuning is actually حاليا being assessed is it worth it ولا لا، بس utilize it as a service. learn how to enable يعني حاجات مناسبة to the domain. يعني AI is يعني re-quoting Andrew is the new electricity. It enables our foundation for a lot of things. For understanding how to use it for your own purpose in mechatronics, how to use it in that domain. انت اقدر ان انت تعرفي الدومين وازاي الاي اي ممكن ingest into it يعني. بس get comfortable مع الكودينج languages بتاعتها or get yourself on a platform. and I will not oversell Microsoft هنا, but so there's a lot of open tools that you can learn. Llama models actually يعني are open sourced. They're provided by Meta. So you can play around with them to learn. يعني it's just currently a domain is being shaped and it's just a tool. واستخدميها على هذا الأساس. Get familiar مع tool in the usage within mechatronics is my immediate advice يعني.
أوكي، شكرا.
طيب كان في برضو سحر كانت رافعة ايديها من بدري.
اتفضلي.
طب يا
سحر
دكتور
انت
ممكن
معانا؟
يمكن عندها مشكلة في الصوت يعني لو
ممكن. طب لو حد عايز يسأل حاجة يرفع ايده تاني.
تمام، ممكن أسأل سؤال؟
اتفضل.
تمام، كان في سؤال للناس اللي كانت بتسجل في الفورم. كان في سؤال بيقول what would be the effect of large language models on the computer architecture career.
on humanity in general بقى يعني. والناس خايفة ان AI يجي يعني ايه ويسوايب يعني a lot of fields out of to extinction. يعني ايه يعني زي ما العربية جت يعني ايه الناس اللي كانت يعني بتعمل الهورس كاريج يعني ايه اختفت يعني ايه يعني. بس they were repurposed. And this is a good segue to actually يعني to starting of this يعني ايه it's called the co-pilot era. I'll actually يعني address that يعني ايه notion immediately in this. يعني في الكام سنة اللي فاتوا في wave of يعني مش كام سنة، في الشهور اللي فاتت ما عادتش بالسنين دلوقتي. wave of co-pilots announced. GitHub مثلا announced a co-pilot عشان increase the productivity بتاعت الديفلوبر. We allow them to innovate much faster. It has an impact on the developers and their productivity. أنا personally مثلا لما بحب أكتب كود أو يعني بعمل حاجة دلوقتي ساعات يعني إيه يعني طب get me started, get me there. Microsoft specifically يعني these are a list of Microsoft co-pilots among there's about يعني 20 some co-pilots يعني. But so they help people يعني ايه يعني be creative. They help people in their efficiency في يعني مثلا في productivity tools بتاعت Microsoft بتاعت Office 365 Dynamics Power Platform أو Security. All of these co-pilots يعني ايه are tools to provide assistance to improve productivity مش to replace humans in their processes. يعني ما زال لسه يعني ايه يعني الكود اللي هيطلع there is no assurance ان هو مناسب، فلازم someone vet through الى ال very simple things. يعني ايه يعني انا مثلا برضه revamping يعني ايه يعني the basic things اللي كانت موجوده اللي very simple بقت يعني موجوده. الكالكوليتور يعني ايه انا لما كنت في الكليه كانت يعني كان مسموح الكالكوليتور في حتت معقوله. يعني دلوقتي في المدرسه الكالكوليتور مسموح يعني you have to do math by your hand. It has not replaced engineers يعني the invention of a calculator. It has helped them. برضو يعني ايه co-pilots of this AI will help people, but it would also deem people need to be repurposed. محتاجين يغيروا الهابتس بتاعتهم، يغيروا الحياة اللي بيعملوها day in and day out to be more suitable to this era. فلو خدنا مثال هنا يعني ايه يعني financial organization عايزة تعمل co-pilot experience يعني هيبقى عندها شوية يعني ايه يعني components to to summarize, to group, to filter, to learn, to simulate cost benefit. You can plug it into a prompt, and creating this prompt that you can do. You want to leverage a data source, and فيها some documents, فيها some data, and we'll run into some of these. And you also need to cover that with protection, with security, with content filtering, and other plugins to make sure that the output is contained and produced. And it's not here to replace people doing their business in a financial institution. It is there to help them be more productive, to help them be more efficient, وبالتالي to help them to be more creative, to help them to create new things and more innovation. Copilot GitHub Copilot has not replaced developers. GitHub Copilot is used by developers to improve their outcome, to improve their performance, and to improve their efficiency. While humanity is lingering why what AI would do to it, they should be also looking how to ياخدوا التكنولوجي دي ويستخدموها to improve efficiency. And LLMs do not reside in their own world. It's not always one thing in an end, but ساعات بيبقى an end-to-end scenario. You actually need a workflow that includes multiple tasks and multiple prompts to happen. This is in contrast. For example, this is a pipeline موجود على GitHub that we produced, how to use OpenAI in transcription, improving transcription. إن ناخد مثلا محتوى في فيديو وطلع له مثلا dubbing automatically in another language. فOpenAI ممكن يجي enhance الترانزليشن من one language to other does not necessarily need to adhere requirements بتاعت the remainder part of this task. The remainder part of this task إن أنا محتاج البليسمنت بتاع اللغة الأصلية تكون مناسبة المسلسلات التركي تكون تركي للعربي. They don't necessarily need to be the same length. هل أنا ممكن أكستمايز بدون ما أغير المحتوى نفسه أو أغير المعنى باستخدام OpenAI, not just merely translating one to one. ممكن ساعتها مثلا العربي يبقى أطول من Turkish وبالتالي يبقى عملية معقدة في البليسمنت بتاعه. This can be a one-off component within another workflow in order to use OpenAI to enhance it. And you can think about this برضو in transcripting medical بدل ما الدكتور يعوز يكتب والقصص دي لا يكلم في الموديل بتاع مثلا whisper the speech model بتاع OpenAI اقدر استخدمه واطلع الترانسكريبت واستعمل prompt ان انا احسن الترانسكريبت بما ان المودلز دي have an understanding of medical terms و medical terminology فيقدر يحسنه ويعمل correction بحيث يطلع لي في الاخر a standard summary that identifies within a certain standard في standards للمedical summarization or medical reporting بيقدر يطلعها هو مباشرة لأنه عارفها. مش محتاج اقول له محتاج تحط الانديكيشنز هنا والتريتمنت هنا هو بقول له طلع البتاعه دي هو عارفها وبيطلعها immediately. You can actually leverage this as part of a pipeline, or you can leverage it in a pipeline of processes or tasks وهنا there is a need to do something called orchestration. Is how to handle these tasks. It's not always that a task is very simple one-off, but you can have multiple model, multiple prompts. It implements a certain business logic. فيها المانجمنت بتاعتها, فيها prompt filling, فيها handling state, handling access control. وفي models that are static أنا بقول له اعمل 1 2 3 or agentic orchestration. The static orchestration ان انا عارف انا هعمل تاسك 1 وتاسك 2 وتاسك 3 وتاسك 4 بحطهم ورا بعض I don't need to think about it. You can chain these events that would happen for every query وممكن حتى اعمل gating or some functions ان انا affect عليها بس more or less it is very descriptive. I understand end to end what needs to be done and there can be chaining for this process to happen. Pros بتاعتها you have high degree of control. It's very simple to implement and debug. It's generally cheaper to perform. الكونز بتاعتها انها very rigid تغييرها يبقى صعب it's not very customizable to different conditions اللي ممكن تظهر. لما احب اضيف يعني new tools it becomes a bit more complicated يعني complex queries بتبتدي تبقى صعبه قوي ان نعمل الورك فلو بالطريقه دي. Another family is agentic orchestration. Agentic orchestration زي حاجه اسمها LangChain or semantic kernel provides an anatomy يعني لل LLM to decide what to do. Autonomy لل LLMs ان هم decide what to do. You give it access to a set of tools. ادي التولز اللي موجوده، ادي البلجنز، ادي whatever they're called in the lingo يعني and you give it access to them. It starts to execute that process based on its understanding. فأول حاجة بتعملها إنها understand أنا هعمل إيه and then starts to run. It is flexible and extensible and it can tackle complex queries, overcome the limitations of some tools. On the cons يعني it's more expensive, it's generally slower لأن في a lot more thinking, a lot more planning happening along the way. وإن كان في طرق يعني to how to improve that يعني through caching or whatnot. وممكن to go on its own thought يعني ممكن يعني ايه يعني to go on rant في قصه بعيده كده يعني ايه فتبعد عن الهدف الاساسي بتاعتها. المشهورين طبعا اللانج تشين والسيمانتيك كيرنل are two sort of agentic orchestration frameworks موجوده. وهنا مثلا هو بيقول والله انا يعني ايه يعني I need to ask about a certain function. هو بيروح dissect the problem. هنا مثلا يعني I want to يعني start by finding the temperature and then using that to calculate يعني or raise it to 0.35. I need to يعني fetch the temperature in San Francisco وابتدي احولها. فهو بيقسم يعني التاسك اللي مديها له. What is the high temperature in San Francisco yesterday in Fahrenheit? What is the number raised to some power? بيقسم الانبوت اللي داخل السيستم الى مجموعه tasks or مجموعه events that it would be executed one after the other through an understanding. فانا بدي للجن AI model البروبلم دي بيقول لي والله ادي البلان that you should go on that you should go and execute. There's some benefits يعني one over the other. يعني الثاني برضه leveraging and design patterns and tools using يعني LangChain or semantic kernel. Where on the other hand you can optimize a static flow. It is more flexible in what it can support. الثاني is very tailored. One is generally more expensive and one is generally faster. This is a comparison. In order also the languages that they support. Obviously semantic kernel and LangChain you have to follow it here. The processes بتاعتهم أو SDKs that they do compared to you can go and do your static flow in your own environment. Customization, we did mention sort of training, fine-tuning, and prompt engineering, but comes the aspect of adding your own data. And I produce content that is suitable for my patients or suitable for my enterprise. مش عايز أطلع data that's generally known. I need something that's specific to me. أنا عندي مثلا sales forecast to my product, I needed to use my data. أنا عندي يعني documentations بتاعتي أو internal documents بتاعتي بتاعت enterprise. I'm offering a service to a set of customers. مش عايز أخليه يروح يدور في المانيولز بتاعت my competition. I want to use my own data. فهنا يجي حاجة اسمها RAG pattern أو Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is basically إن أنا given a user input, but generate a query. I would go and access my data. This data can be of structured or unstructured form. بروح أدور through an index and then add that result. So I fetch this data and then place it into what I'm asking my large language model to do, and then apply that to get the result. That's basically what they're doing. If you're augmenting the individual data that you have to your prompt and you're using that. So a basic prompt would come with a system message and then a query, and then you can start and put in resources that you're going to leverage in order to go and get and answer that question. أنا عندي healthcare plan. يعني هل فيها يعني AI examination؟ مش عايز أجيب حاجة من الإنترنت أو general knowledge that's encoded in LLM. I need to get يعني sources that get that in my data and then get a response for that. A RAG pattern with semantic kernel again dissects this into getting the question, transforming it to an embedding, getting the embedding vector, getting the vector and finding similar aspects, enhancing that in order to do the search query, retrieving the data, and then plugging it into OpenAI or whatever large language model you're using in order to get the answer, and then that is produced to the user. الأكشن plans هنا بقى ممكن يبقى one action، ممكن يبقى sequence of actions، أو ممكن يبقى stepwise actions. فممكن أبص كده أقول والله أنا عايز أعمل one action, this is one task. The other is okay, I have a sequence. هعمل I'll fetch the data, I will process it, I will do this. أو ممكن يبقى stepwise. I will fetch the data, get the output, and then compare the output to what I was expect. لا الداتا اللي طلع لي دي مش كفاية، طب لا يبقى محتاجة reconsider my query and then go and do another query to get more focused data and get it a stepwise planner. LangChain is more in the stepwise planner area. Semantic kernel is more in the sequential planner area. ولو هي لو أنا عندي single best a process that I always use, then you can use your own sort of planning to do that, and you don't need to use these. But so they are pretty handy to do that. In order to use unstructured data, basically if هي an ingestion process، لازم unstructured data زي documents زي emails، عايزة أبص في الدوكيومنتس بتاعت الهيلث بلان documents اللي موجودة، أدور على clauses فيها. You need to ingest this into an index. Ingestion onto an index does have an effect on how you're searching it. لو أنا بسيرش in bigger chunks يبقى الprompts بتاعتي هتبقى larger، يبقى الcost بتاعي هيبقى أعلى. لو أنا بدور على smaller chunks يبقى context is less، وبالتالي الefficiency بتاعت performance stat system بتاعتي تبقى أقل. There are some considerations you have to think about when you're ingesting or integrating your model, your data into a search index. This search index is leveraged as users put a query. A query is transformed into something to go and ask this data. Data is collected or retrieved. يبقى عندي مجموعة من الدوكيومنتس بحطها في الprompt and then plug it into a large language model and then أعمل the final task that is required. Alternatively, also in an enterprise مش كل حاجة لازم تبقى موجودة in documents or unstructured form. ممكن there's a lot of data that exists in databases and structured data. But you can actually leverage unstructured and structured data. You need to look at them. But you also need to look at other aspects within this, including role-based access control. مين اللي عنده access to data دي. Not everyone has access to everything. You need to also consider that in that light. Internally على GitHub and I can share part of this deck and links to this. We do have a repo that can enable you to do حاجة اسمها an internal Contoso internal bot. Contoso is a company بتبيع surface devices. فعندها database فيها sales وفيها information وعندها المانيوالز والinstructions بتاعت surface devices. So you can use natural language to access this. It honors who's asking. It extracts elements from documents and is able to also give citations. You can ask على مثلا my stock. You can go and ask an SQL database على stock that I have from a specific model. It honors that I have access, and I do have access to all the data. If you do not have access and you should not be looking into this data, then it actually through role-based access control can actually control. And then you can ask what is the most suitable surface device for engineering students. And هتروح تفتش شوية documents that are associated with this. لما سألت السؤال ده actually حوله إلى an SQL query. فgenerated a query من التكست اللي أنا قلته ده عشان access a database. لما سألته هنا generated a prompt و actually collected a set of documents من اللي موجودة injected جوه الprompt عشان خاطر يقدر يستخدمها to produce this final answer that is being claimed that the service book 3 is the more suitable to engineering students. الcitation ده برضه process يعني ايه يعني وان كان this might be the answer that you want بس يعني جزء من ability to vet through او الواحد يتاكد او then rework هنا is this ability to produce citation, and through this process of its RAG pattern you're able to actually produce these citations as an output يعني not just the answer that can be supportive. هل OpenAI is safe from risks? That is not true. There is a lot of things you need to think about. The data that you're plugging in what is being placed هل الداتا اللي بحطها دي عليها copyright? Is there things that people can look at that might question the output that I'm doing? The trust with safety. Then the data is actually incorporated into the model. You can plug in a lot of data that should not be there. They need a lot of computational power عشان develop making it very limited. The best resource companies, which is not necessarily the ones that have resources, you need to have access to them. There's people who can use it maliciously deep fakes مثلا يقدروا يطلعوا videos يطلعوا sound that sounds very similar to someone might slander reputation between individuals, organizations or whatnot. حاجة زي deep fake probably on your feeds on your social feeds ممكن تلاقوا ناس بتحطها ناس بتقول كلام مش راكب على بعضه بس هم they're using deep fake to model presidents مثلا saying things. Bias, obviously the data that is being injected might have internal bias. وبالتالي this bias can be amplified in the generation process that is being done. There's ways to try and overcome that and I'll touch on it very quickly as we go on. It's not there to eliminate jobs. It's a very valid concern and a lot of people but it's there to help people and to actually make them work more efficiently. There are some harms and there's a notion of responsible AI, how to use AI responsibly. Hallucination with errors are part of what these models come out with. There's people are trying to jailbreak, do حاجة اسمها prompt injection as an attack عشان خاطر يقدر يحط information surface things that he or she should not be seeing. You can produce harmful content and code and can manipulate and be like sort of allow manipulation by presenting human-like behavior. والmitigation بتاعت الrisks دي at different levels على your selection of a model, على your selection of a platform that you're using هل هي retain data, honor privacy, what happens to the content that I'm sending. Does it detect some of these things that do content filtering in and out? All of these come with the system safety. There's meta prompting with grounding. And there's the user experience, which is the icing on the cake as you're producing this. How can you put a user experience that make sure that it adheres to حاجة اسمها responsible AI. Responsible AI is a notion, and a lot of these big companies working in AI came to enforce this responsible AI, and Microsoft is obviously one of them that takes this very seriously and to heart. So there's some practices on meta prompting specifically. If you need to ground your response, you need to sort of reference حاجات factual أو حاجات موجودة you're retrieving and you're placing it. فدي grounding ده الأساس that you're doing. You need to set the tone of your response. You need to adhere to safety. محتاج تقول في الprompt you must not do this. You should decline to do that. المفروض ما تعملش الحاجات المعينة دهيت. And then you should safeguard against jailbreak. You could put some rules. You could look at aspects of that. You need to define these meta prompts. So prompts are becoming larger to encompass different aspects دهيت in the process to make sure that it is safe and is used responsibly. Bias, again, human, there is bias in the data that is being used. models they are annotated with data that came from some human judgment or reasoning. There is ways now to do to avoid things also. Bias might come from sampling. ممكن اختار sample of older folks فعندهم مثلا medical conditions معينة ولا younger folks absence of medical conditions معينة. فيجيب لي information that is not really fair and has a bias to either a sample, to a certain idea, or to certain content. وده اللي هو الفيدباك loop that after output has come, it's flagged as bias, it is relabeled, re-injected into the training data. OpenAI indicate that this is part of the process that has evolved in their models. Reliability بتاعتها hallucinations. Hallucinations are part of these large language models, and they're becoming more complicated with the amount of information that is encompassed in them. They're becoming more convincing بيطلعوا إجابات شكلها مقنع بس ممكن ما تبقاش very factual. There's two types of hallucinations. There's intrinsic, which اللي هو الموديل بيطلع inaccuracies or unsupported claims، بيطلع حاجة outlandish مش not claim. أو extrinsic بيطلع nonsensical or improbable statements at all in that light. These are the two types of hallucinations. So you need to safeguard against them, and there's ways of doing that. The time will not permit. I'm already over time to run more into this yet. So as a closing statement, is GenAI the answer for everything? هل هو ده الحل لكل شيء? It's no. There is still room for very focused, very simple tasks to be done with simple models. موجودة. Is the GenAI here to last? Is AI in general sort of taking providing enough evidence انها تقدر تعمل الحاجات اللي هم في الخمسينات من القرن الماضي كانوا حاسين انها تاخد صيف واحد وتخلصها. We're coming to that limit where AI models are very close to representing humans in their ability to understand and produce content. We're getting there. It is a tool. It needs to be handled in a manner that would enable us to improve our livelihoods. We need to safeguard against the existence of new tools and people using it. But it's here to stay. It's not the answer for everything at this stage, but it is taking the world by storm. In a few years, AI would be common everywhere as we see it in abundance. With that, a quick note, I thank you, and no few questions I'll be happy to entertain. And sorry I went over time.
لو حد عنده سؤال أو حاجة يرفع إيده. طيب واضح إن مفيش أسئلة. حابة أشكر حضرتك مرة تانية يا دكتور على التوك، كانت فعلا مفيدة وانسبايرنج، فشكرا جدا على وقت حضرتك.
العفو. No questions. معناها the presenter did a very bad job or a very good job. I generally question the good job بس أنا شاكر the opportunity إن أنا أقابل المجموعة اللي موجودة هنا. It was nice. وشاكر لكم التنظيم، وتاني أعتذر عن شوية disconnect حصل that was a bit out of my hand، بس I do need to apologize sincerely ليها، لأن أنا مش قادر أغفر لنفسي العملية دي يا جماعة. it's not a good working ethic بس خير إن شاء الله.
أكيد مفيش أي مشاكل يا دكتور، وشكرا جدا جدا لحضرتك. بجد ويبنار كان ممتع وكويس جدا.
شكرا جزيلا.
تمام، أنا بعت دلوقتي الفيدباك فورم، يا ريت الناس تملاها. شكرا مرة تانية لحضرتك يا دكتور، وبس كده التوك بتاعتنا خلصت.